So what does effective management look like when you're coordinating these multidisciplinary design teams in those areas? And how does that, I feel like there's probably some risk management involved, and all our project manager brains can't turn off that thought process.
I always a true believer that communication is the key to manage risk. Risk is always there and will always be, and it's the same on everything in life. But if you communicate effectively, that's going to help you a long way, because then misunderstandings will not happen and things like that. Efficient communication is different than excessive.
What causes some of the most costly failures in geotechnical engineering? It's not always the design. It's often the disconnect between people. In today's episode, we're joined by Sebastian Lobo-Guerrero, Ph.D, PE, BC.GE, Geotechnical Project Manager and Laboratory Manager at American Geotechnical and Environmental Sciences, who will share what it takes to lead multidisciplinary teams through the complexities of deep foundations, retaining structures, and slope stabilization. We're going to talk about how communication really brings it all together. Whether you're leading multidisciplinary teams through complexities of deep foundations, or you're just talking to some stakeholders that you need to update on a situation. We'll be bridging the gap between the technical experience and the real-world project management decisions you're going to have to make every day. We all know that costly communication breakdowns between engineers and project managers are something we want to avoid. So join Sebastian and I to talk about how we're going to do that in an impactful way. Before we jump into today's podcast, I want to tell you about our AEC PM Connect event. This event is built for project managers who want to improve project delivery, communication, and leadership through practical sessions and tools. These events are going to provide an avenue to connect with leading PMs in the industry. Visit AECPMConnect.com and register today. We currently have events in Kansas City and New Jersey, with more coming. I'm your host, Fiona Johan, and this is the AEC Project Management Podcast. As always, let's jump right in.
Transform your technical experts into impactful leaders with EMI's Engineering Leadership Accelerator. Tailored for AEC professionals, this program enhances communication, delegation, and decision-making skills. Flexible, interactive, and designed to fit your team's schedule. Elevate your team's leadership capabilities today. Visit engineeringmanagementinstitute.org and click on Corporate Training.
All right, well, now it's time for our PM Conversation of the Week with Sebastian Lobo-Guerrero, Ph.D, PE, BC.GE. Sebastian, welcome to the Engineering Project Management Podcast.
Thank you very much, and it's awesome to be here.
Awesome.
Looking forward to a great conversation with you today.
So excited you're here. So to start us off, we always like to give our listeners a little bit of a background. Can you tell us about your path? What led you to your current role as the Geotechnical Project Manager and Laboratory Manager at Aegis Inc.?
Yes, no, absolutely, because there is a lot of managers on those titles, and I never really studied for that, right? So it's an interesting journey. I was born and raised in Bogota, Colombia. That's where I'm originally from. That explains the accent, and I think that also explains the speed of talking, which has really nothing to do either with coffee or cocaine, which are probably the most two popular products of Colombia, and I'm not a user of any of the two. So yeah, so I don't know. I guess I'm just wired this way that I speak fast, but I'll try my best to pace myself. But yes, I was born and raised in Colombia. I did my undergrad there. I studied civil engineering. My grandfather is a civil engineer. My dad is a civil engineer. Everyone in my family was a civil engineer. I didn't even know there were other professions different than civil engineering.
Stuck to the family business.
Yes, I think the craziest person in my family was a geologist. So, it's like we're all in the same.
What are they doing over there in geology?
Yes. So, but yeah, so we, I grew up there. I finished my undergrad. I grew up going to my dad to site visits and things like that. Important to note that he was in construction management, not really in engineering design. He studied civil engineering, but he specialized in construction management. And that's what he did all his career as an engineer, first with a company and then independent. So I grew up with this figure, and I grew up like going to all the job sites with him and related to civil engineering in general. Then I went to college with my undergrad in civil engineering, and I had the opportunity to come to the US to do a master's and a PhD. that's what I did. I came to University of Pittsburgh, did both degrees combined in about 5 years. And then after that, I started working in consulting industry, which was very interesting because it was not exactly what my dad used to do. It was kind of like the opposite. I mean, on the other side of the equation. And yeah, it was like a change, but I wanted to do that. So I went into that. I started working in consulting. I've been working for now almost 20 years in this company, which is the reason for my lorry background. But it's called American Geotechnical and Environmental Services. And yeah, I started there as an entry-level engineer, have grown through these 20 years, and I am where I am. And, I also teach at the University of Pittsburgh. I started teaching some years ago as an adjunct professor. I absolutely love doing that. And I also work a lot with professional societies, the Foundation Institute, the American Society of Civil Engineers, Geo Institute, and then basically trying to get myself as busy as possible. So that's pretty much the path that I have done in general, right? Now, I mean, I know the topic of today is management, and it's an interesting path because, as I said, I did not really went into management, and I think that's something that happened a lot in civil engineering. I don't think any of us really started with the view of saying, I'm going to get into a management position, right? I mean, you want to grow as much as you can, but we all started from the technical side. What brought us into civil engineering was the technical aspect. We wanted to do practical things, in civil engineering, but management was the way. And I remember talking to my dad, and he was one of the first ones to explain me and say, hey, look, nobody that ended up in management in civil engineering really started wanting to be in management. That's the way that your career takes you. But it's important because then you realize you didn't really have all the tools that you should have, right? And I think that's the importance of these podcasts and what EMI does, I mean, and classes and stuff, because a lot of us end up being in this arena that we really never planned to be. I mean, obviously you take some basic classes in college, but it's not exactly for what you end up doing. So you end up basically learning management just by training, by doing it, right? And it's interesting because there are options too, right? I mean, you can do an MBA, and that's great, and some people can do it. But when you look at the typical engineering business operation, I don't know if I mean, don't take me wrong. If you have it, it's a super plus. It's never going to hurt you. It's something good. But I don't really know if you do an MBA and all that, if you should be working on a company that is 70 people, 80 people and managing engineers, because you probably are going to have some skills that you could flex somewhere else rather than that. So it's an interesting mix, but it's definitely something that I appreciate and I encourage. And I think through my life, I have just developed a lot of management tips and things that is just learning by seeing others and a lot of common sense. So I'm very excited to share a lot of those today as we speak.
Yeah,
So,
I think you hit on a lot of really important parts that we talk about a lot, is that, we do come up through this technical upbringing and then somehow you end up in management. There was no training for that, but what you mentioned there that I really like is that, you see what other people are doing and you can apply that. You can see what, the good leaders are doing and the ones
yes.
that you wouldn't replicate, and you can take and sort through those. So hopefully our podcast is just another place for people to do that. And,
Yes.
hear what you have to offer, take the things that work for them that you've learned over the years, apply them, try some things out, and, just continue the learning journey, because management is, it's not, like you said, we're not often trained for it, but you are, and it's eventually your career is going to take you into it if you stick to something long enough.
Yes, and as you pointed out, that's the value of these conversations. And I think what you guys do really is worth it, because if we all could do an MBA, that would be awesome, right? If we have the time in our lives and the money and all that, that would be great. But at some point when you realize in your career, maybe like I passed that stage, right? So
Yeah.
it's hard for me. I will not be able. So all these tools really help you to balance that, right? And it's a way of like non-formal educational degree, but the more you expose to everything that you can, learn, and always understanding that it's a journey and you still need to learn a lot every single day, then the better manager you are going to be, even though that was not the initial goal when you started the journey, right?
Absolutely. And so while we're kind of on this topic of, leadership, you mentioned that you're an adjunct professor. How do you think your leadership approach has evolved over time, whether with mentoring students or managing geotechnical teams in the field? What's changed for you over the course of
Yeah.
your 20 years?
Well, I mean, it's just from the fact that it started, because it's another thing. Like when you start your career, you don't start studying civil engineering because you want to become a leader. I mean, most people that were with me, like in high school, and wanted to be leaders, like, I typically associate more with, like going into politics or something
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that, into going into that. You at the beginning, you don't really understand that a leader is just somebody that is on the field that maybe never really thought about being a leader, but understand and realizes that you have a set of skills that you can do things good and you're efficient, and then people kind of look up to you. And then that's the moment you realize, well, I need to take this responsibility and advance the team. And then I think you become a leader, not by studying, not by reading how to be a leader book or anything like that. You just become a leader because you have to. It's like, it's the only option, like, that you feel that is right
And
to do.
thrust into it.
Exactly. And it's the right thing to do.
Mhm.
And then once you understand that, it becomes a very amazing journey, very rewarding journey. And to me, it's been very interesting because even when I was studying, I mean, obviously I started writing papers, you start feeling that you are leading, things, you start being like teaching assistant. So there is different points on your career that you feel you are in kind of leadership position, showing the way a little bit, but you still don't feel fully embracing to that, right? You don't feel that is, you still feel that you're faking it, kind of thing, right? But then you start working, and that's really when I start seeing it, right? Because you start from the bottom of the chain, right? You are an entry level person, and that's fine. It's perfectly fine. I actually encourage people to enjoy those years, because that's when you create your fundamentals, right, of everything. That's when you learn really everything.
You
But
gotta
then,
know your fundamentals in order to go
oh
lead
yeah, and
people
we'll talk
doing
that
that,
about in a
right?
second, because you can never be a good manager if you don't have fundamentals on the technical side, right? And if you are not good technical, you're never going to be a good manager, because you're talking about things that you don't know. So, in my
Exactly.
opinion, right? So, when you start growing, and you start working, and you start also like realizing that after some years, let's say 5 years is a number that I always have in my mind. After 5 years, you are already very comfortable with the technical part on what you do. And you also have other people that have started after you. And you start realizing that you now became a leader to them. So you have people that were your leaders. Now you're becoming a leader. And something that I really put a lot of attention and importance is mentoring. Because to me, mentoring is all the mix of leader, but even more, right? Because it's leadership also with a purpose of teaching others and training others, not just take you to the right place. It's also like, let me teach you also how you can take others to the right place, right? So once you realize your responsibility with mentorship, that's really when the leadership skills come, right? And in my opinion, that's when you really learn what you need to do. You start thinking, what I need to do to improve, how can I take more people here, and how can I start passing everything that I have learned to others. Obviously, then that goes exponential, right? Because you start doing it in the company that you work. If you are in professional societies, then you get exposed to a lot of different groups of people that you also have now that role and responsibility. And then once you start teaching at university, well, then it's even more. So it's one of those things that when you look back, it's like, how the hell I end up here? I don't know, but I love it. So, I'm just gonna embrace it and try to help others as much as possible.
I love that. I love that, when we're mentoring, we're not only, you've got that person right in front of you, but you're setting the standard for them for what mentorship looks like and how you're leading to the next,
Yeah.
you're developing not just the next generation, but how that next generation of engineers treats the next
The next
generation,
generation. And
right? It's
yes,
just it's a snowball effect. And
and
it's
there
just
is a
so
lot of
important that these
moments.
junior engineers and,
Yes, it's like a whole snowball effect. And there is something, I mean, there is moments that you remember different things. I have the honor and the privilege to be invited a lot to do public speaking engagements and things like that. And I love all of those. I love doing like short courses, technical classes, things like that. And a few years ago, I was back in Colombia teaching a class in a university that I really like, which is called Escuela Colombiana de Ingeniería. It's just about engineering, right? They invited me to do a 1 week class, and I really enjoy it. And I was walking the campus at lunchtime and things like that. And then I passed next to this building that has a very famous quote by one of the founders of the school, and it's a sentence that really resonated in my mind. That says, translation will say something like, everything that you have learned and everything that you have known in your career is useless unless you teach it to somebody else, right? And that to me kind of resonates a lot, because when you start your career, you think that it's all about you learning. and you getting better, right? And I'm not saying it in a wrong way, but it's like, who cares about the rest of the world? It's their problem, right? That's kind of like the way that you see it. It's like, I'll try to learn myself because I'm the one that is on the learning process. But then you realize that all that experience and all those years that you have accumulated, if you don't share them and you don't pass them, they are useless because eventually you're going to be gone. We are all going to be gone.
What's your
right?
legacy? What are you leaving
Exactly.
behind?
And
Yeah.
not even from legacy from the point of view of I want to be remembered forever. Like everyone is going to forget about us, right? And that's okay. That's
Just a blip.
okay.
We're just a blip.
Yes, and I'm okay with that. But it's just how can you make their lives better, right? And their careers, so then they can do the next generation better and the next generation. It's like it's understanding your role in this in this chain or whatever you want to call it. So very
Absolutely.
philosophical there, but yes. But I think
No,
it's
I love it.
important.
I could talk philosophy all day. I will say the flip side of that too is when you're starting out and you're new, it's important to identify those things in your mentors and leaders. Like, what are the things that they're
Yeah,
leaving behind that I can really grab onto and learn from? And it's this dichotomy of the two, both sides of the relationship that I think is so important. So I love that we're
and
talking
that's
about
something
that.
that many people don't think about it, which is learning by looking what you don't like and also what you like.
What you
And
like,
I
though, hold on to the things you like, build on them,
Yes,
right?
but it's also extremely important to see the ones that you don't like. And
Yeah, what's not working there and why isn't it working?
correct, I see it a lot on like presentations, right? So I love doing presentations, technical presentations, but I have a very unique style in terms of I present with a lot of selfies, and that's a whole different story. But I believe on documenting your career. I believe on being extremely proud of what you are and what you have built through the years. And I always take pictures. I have been taking pictures since I was like 10 years old, going with my dad to construction sites. It's just before I never have any platform to share them, and then Facebook appear and LinkedIn appear and all that, and I start sharing them everywhere. But I do try to transmit that to people that we have beautiful professions that you should be proud and you should share that with every single person and things like that. So there is a lot of things that you should be proud and that you should really embrace, right? And when I go into presentations, I think, okay, well, I love to sharing all that. And so all my presentations, honestly, are pure selfies from construction sites on 20 years, even though I put a lot of technical side on things, but it's showing that personal journey and things like that. And when people ask me, like, how do you arrive to that specific way to present? Because clearly, and I said, I mean, I learned from seeing some really good public speakers in our field, right? Like professors that I have through my career, professionals that we interacted. But honestly, probably the most that I learned is from sitting in 25 years of technical talks and seeing the ones that I was like, well, this sucks, right? And I'm just never gonna do something like this. So you kind of improve by seeing that. So most people kind of associate that you learn by seeing the ones that you like, but you also have to watch the ones that you don't like. And I think when it comes to management, it's exactly the same thing. You're going to see
Absolutely.
leaders and you're going to see mentors that you absolutely admire. But the ones that you don't, the ones that are negative, don't fight with them. Just,
Learn.
just kind of pass, but just make a mental note of saying, I will never become this person. Right?
Yeah. I like that. I think it leads me kind of to another question I had for you, which is, you're talking about presentations and technical, jargon and pieces. And what I heard you saying there was, storytelling and finding your story that you're telling and sharing. How would you take that and approach translating the technical insights, right, into the practical decisions
Yeah.
you're making in the real world projects? So how are we talking to stakeholders and engineers and project owners by using all the things you just said? How are you applying that?
Well, it's all about communication, right? And at the end of the day, on management and technical, it's all about communication. And I think there is also a point of our careers that we realize that you could be the best person technically, but if you cannot transmit that, you are zero. You are going to be absolutely useless, right? Which is hard. It's very hard to grasp because when we were in college, we always thought, no, technical is everything. I thought, no, I don't know if everyone thought, but technical is everything. If I'm the best technical person, my career is fine. But then you realize that it's not only that. I mean, all the technical things are useless if you cannot transmit it to a stakeholder or to an owner or to an agency that are not on the same technical level as you. And I think part of what I would like to call my success is that I am a very simple person. in life and in everything. I like very simple things. I don't really have any fancy things. And I think the way that I live also define the way that I work. Being simple in that respect is like everything should be easy to understand. Everything should be logical, right? I also kind of got the conclusion early in my career that even when I was doing my PhD, that is like, okay, if I'm a good student and I have a professor that is explaining something that is impossible to understand, maybe it's not me, right? I mean, I'm a professional student. I've been, when I was finishing my PhD, I was 10 years in school total, right? So I'm like, I think if somebody's explaining something to me and I cannot not understand it, I'm not thinking that I'm really smart or anything like that. I'm not trying to put myself like as amazing skills that if you explain me something I don't understand, then that is your problem. No, I'm just saying as a regular person, if somebody explains you something and you cannot understand, most of the time it's because not your problem. If you have the fundamentals, it's not your problem, it's their problem. They are just not going to be clear. And why people sometimes don't explain well what they want to explain, because they don't really understand it well, right? And they are just kind of like the whole thing of faking it, right? They are just telling words that they have listened before and they're just repeating them, but they haven't truly interiorized that. And because reaching these reflections and all that, I always thought, okay, I never want to become one person like that. I want to explain things on a very simple way, the way that I understand them. And I need to simplify because it's a simple life. We need to simplify things because otherwise we don't go anywhere. And you also see it looking and learning from from negative examples or something like that. You also see that. You see a lot of people that grow in the industry that probably unfairly grow because they are not that good technical, but their communication skills are so good that they grow.
Yeah.
Even if they have a technical voice.
in the room.
Yes. I mean, eventually, right? Eventually, some of them end up being caught and some of them end up paying the price of not knowing fundamentals. But let's say that they sometimes go further than people that are really good technical, but didn't have communication skills and end up being stuck. So it's a mix of one friend always give me this example. You need to know how to create the car, how to operate the car, but you need to be able to sell the car, right? So
Yes.
you need to sell the car. I mean, if you are a great engineer, but you cannot sell the project, then good luck. Then you're just doing an academic exercise, right? And nobody wants to just do that, right?
What I love about all that is, lots of times when we're learning, like you said, we have the technical experience and we're learning how to communicate. And it's tempting to be like, okay, who am I talking to? How am I delivering it to this one person? And that you can really overthink that. And it is an important skill to start learning, like walk in the room and quickly clock, what does this person need to be convinced about this project, right? Like, what is the thing this person's going to grab onto? But what I like what you said in that is keep it simple. Right?
Mhm.
Most things, if we keep it at that simple level, we can get to that a little faster. If we don't dive in, I mean, if you're going into a room talking to another engineer, then you're going to need that technical, that
correct.
technical knowledge, that technical background. That's what you're going to want to talk about. If you're walking in to talk to a community about this project and you're, defending it to city council, then that is a whole different level of conversation. And that's they have different wants and needs out of that conversation. It's really important to clock that, but if you keep it simple, it's a better baseline than if we run in with all the technicalities.
Yes, and I'll give you a perfect example on that. I always
love
love the challenges on public presentations and things like that. I always love the challenge of I like presenting. I mean, I naturally like presenting, and I love to start explaining a topic and see the reaction of the crowd, right? And I do a lot of jokes, and that's typically my gauge. If I see people are laughing, then it's like, okay, this is going well. If he's not laughing, then I need to switch to other technique because this is not going to work. And I like to see that on the explanations too. Same as when I teach classes, right? You can immediately see if the students are following or not, right? And then you need to adjust based on that. With our young engineers at the company, it's the same. If I'm explaining something and I see faces that are like, what? Then it's like you have to adjust. But one perfect example is that I always use the same PowerPoints when I do, regardless of audience, right? And it's mostly pictures. And something that I'm extremely proud is I've been invited to my son's school to give presentations about projects. And I use the same PowerPoint that I do in any technical professional society. And with the same PowerPoint, being able to explain the project at obviously two different levels. I mean, my son it's 11 now, but what I'm saying is we are not presenting to people that are, seniors in high school or anything like that. You are talking to a really basic understanding. And being able to explain that to them and see excitement on their faces and it's like, oh, that's a cool project and all that is very rewarding. I think having an ability to adapt to different audiences. It's not easy, and it's a very hard challenge, but it's very rewarding when you feel that you can, overcome that challenge. It gives you a lot of
Absolutely.
confidence, basically.
Yeah, and every time you do it, you're going to get better at it, right?
Yes,
So,
exactly.
and
Exactly.
maybe imagine that you're presenting to the 11-year-olds,
Exactly. You can use that.
If you can do it for them, if you can convince them,
You can definitely put the bar and say, well, if I convince them, I should be able to convince this person.
then I can convince anyone. If you got a
Yes.
group of 11-year-olds, you're golden.
Exactly.
Oh, that's great. I love that. Keep it simple. Communication is key. Another thing we like to talk about too is risk management. And you obviously probably have a lot of that in your projects,
Mhm.
especially when we're looking around, like you're leading teams across complex global technical specialties like deep foundations, earth retention systems, landslide stabilization. So what does effective management look like when you're coordinating these multidisciplinary design teams in those areas? And how does that, I feel like there's probably some risk management involved, and all our project manager brains can't turn off that thought process.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's risk management. Obviously, it's probably one of the most important things that we have to keep in mind, right? Everything that we do involves a level of risk, and that's the reason we're paid to do it, right? I mean, you're doing an engineering design, you're doing a foundation. Of course, there is risk. If you screw up on the foundation and the thing fails, then bye-bye to your career, right? Company is gone. Professional liability insurance kicks in. So that's the risk, but then how you mitigate risk. So I always have be a true believer that communication is the key to manage risk. Risk is always there and will always be, and it's the same on everything in life. But if you communicate effectively, right, that's going to help you a long way, because then misunderstandings will not happen and things like that. Efficient communication is different than excess of communication. Excess of the communication sometimes may hurt, because then things become just like noise, right? I mean, if you communicate every single thing that happened and it's emails every 5 minutes and team meetings every 30 minutes, people just get bored.
Or tune out.
And then it's just tune out because it's too much. So it's communication, but in an efficient way, on what is important, in an organized way, right? Respecting meetings, respecting time of people. I think that is extremely important. Other ways to minimize risk, obviously, and guess probably one of the most important ones, and the first one that you should implement, is always the scope of work. You're only supposed to do what you say that you were doing on your scope of work. And some people sometimes put scopes of work. I mean, obviously, I spend a lot of time doing proposals. And, I see other companies that people treat proposals as like, who cares? Maybe I get the job. Maybe I don't get the job. Let's just get something out. We'll deal with that later. And that's the most dangerous attitude that you can have, because your scope of work is the only tool that you have at that time to say what I'm doing and specifically what I'm not doing, right?
It's your contract.
And by having a very good scope of work, you minimize that risk right at the beginning. So if you enter a project with a clear view of your scope of work, what you're supposed to do, and then you also have very efficient communication, those risks will be minimized. They will never disappear, but they will be minimized, right? And transmitting problems, right? If you see a problem, problems don't go away. Just because you pretend that they are not there, they are never going to go away. So it's being, proactive on if you see a problem or at the beginning of a problem, attack it, right? Being transparent. I'm a true believer of transparency too. Like, don't give two versions to different people. It's like, just do things the right way, right? And your transparency will always get you to good places, right? Recognize the risk when they appear, recognize the issues, work together as a team to solve it. Don't start pointing fingers or anything like that. So those are like things that I have learned in my career that really goes along.
Yeah, scope of work can really help with those misinterpretations, right? And especially between your technical teams and your project managers, and can really help you avoid all those misinterpretations from the onset.
Yeah.
What do you think, so it sounds like your scope of work, huge, important piece for you. What else can we do to avoid those misinterpretations along the way?
Well, I mean, in the communication part is, don't let other people think something with the hope that then they're going to change their mind or something like that. If you see that there is a misunderstanding or something, immediately work. And don't be afraid to say, hey, that's not what I'm supposed to do here, right? I think at the beginning of our careers, we have an attitude of pleasing clients. So it's like, whatever I can do to keep the client happy, I'll do it because I want that client to be recurrent. And that's fine. And I absolutely agree we need to do that. But at some point, you have to, very professional and very respectfully, you have to set your limit and say, that's not part of what I'm doing, right? Like, where you are taking the project, you are taking my involvement in the project in an area that is risky, because I'm not supposed to do that since the beginning. I may not have a scope, I may not have hours, whatever, or that may be not my specialty, right? I'm not going to pretend that I know something in an area that I don't just to look good in front of a client, right? So it's keeping those expectations, right, very realistic in a polite way, and saying no, learning how to say no and say no, we cannot not do that part.
Yeah, saying no is tough, but it's a really important lesson. I'd say not just in projects, but in,
Yeah,
even in your career,
in
right?
your
Like
career, yeah,
you have to focus and say no so that you can say yes to something else that's going to be more
yes,
meaningful to
correct,
your career growth. If
and
we
do
say
it in a
yes to
way that
everything,
is
we run out of bandwidth so fast.
correct, and obviously, if things like that come along that are tough, I mean, just be professional and courteous, and that's fine, right? It's like people are not going to stop giving you a job. I mean, they probably appreciate your honesty and your bluntness more than anything, right? Rather than just being a yes person and saying yes and then dealing with the
And figuring it
consequences.
out on the back end.
Yes, exactly,
That's no fun for
exactly,
anyone.
exactly,
I
exactly.
love the honesty and the transparency can really get you a very long way. And so, those are good. It comes all back to the communication. Clearly, you've built a career that's bridging the academics and the consulting work. What lessons or experiences have you been most influenced by in your professional growth?
Yeah, that part it's also super interesting because, as I mentioned at the beginning, I always thought I was going to be a contractor, right? Always thought I was going to be a contractor. I grew up with my dad, and I remember him kind of making fun of designers and saying designers have no idea, right, of what they are doing. We are contractors. We are the ones that construct things. But then my grandfather was on the other side. He was in pure design. So since the beginning, I saw the two worlds. Then I go to college, and I also realized that there is a third world. Not only you have contractors, consultants, and there is academia. And you start seeing that big gap in the stereotype, right? Academia, and I'm just saying it's the stereotype. I'm not saying an individual.
You're not going to hurt my feelings. I
Correct.
spent 8 years working in academia.
So, in academia, people think, okay, maybe the industry is not as technical as it should be. Then people in the industry thinks, well, academia is just an exercise, and you have these differences, right? And to me, it was never really that way. I mean, I understand there is different things, but it doesn't mean they have to be separate. Then you also see a lot of people that have bridges, right? You see a lot of good professors that I had and others that I didn't have, but I see them on their practice. You have really good professors that also do consulting, and then you do a lot of people that do in industry that also do academia. And that became a priority to me, which was trying to mix the two because I absolutely love both, right? I mean, I did a PhD and I love doing it. It's just I love the teaching. I love the research. It's just that I wanted to go back into doing more projects. That's what brought me initially into civil engineering, right? So I decided to go on that. But something that always hurt me was I wanted to teach, right? And I wanted to be involved on academia too. Uh, but I think when I started my career, I still needed sometimes to get the practical experience and being effective. Then I started having opportunities with professional societies to start teaching, doing presentations. And then eventually I have the opportunity with the university to go back. And I absolutely love it because it's extremely satisfactory when you teach classes and when you teach, the examples that you're using are projects that you have done during 20 years experience, right? So then you feel that you are teaching the way that you do it. And it's great. I mean, I think it's a good combination. I think I'm doing exactly what I love because I love being a consultant that teaches. I think it helped me a lot in my consulting part. I mean, just from the point of view of recruiting and getting new people in the company helps a lot. But beyond that, I love being involved in the university and seeing the research they're doing and all that. So it's great to be in industry and teaching, but also teaching. It's great to teach and have experience in consulting because now you're bringing, you know, practical experience and the students absolutely appreciate that too. You're giving a different vision. So, I mean, I think we all need to work on really finish that gap. I mean, and just bridge it. I feel universities are definitely putting a lot of work into doing that. I mean, I can tell you, University of Pittsburgh, where I teach, they have professors of practice, and they are putting an emphasis in having a lot of adjunct people. And the way that they do it is they have different courses, right? So basically, people in industry teach courses that are more related to practical application, and then obviously professors that are full-time professors teach things that are more towards research. And I think we complement each other extremely well. So it's good. I think it's a good combination. We never have to take one side or the other. We should be all on both in different capacities because at some point we were part of the other, right?
And it's all part of that ecosystem of bringing in the new and
Mm-hmm.
taking from the experienced. That's all good stuff. Well, with that, we're winding down to our PM pitfalls question. So, what do you think is the biggest PM pitfall that you've identified? And how would you recommend overcoming it or avoiding it for those project managers out there?
Okay, so we talk a lot about a few, so I don't want to repeat those, right? So we talk about scope of work, communication, and all that. But there is, and obviously keeping things on track. Time management is key, right? It's like don't let things slip to the end. Always have a schedule, a chronogram. Things don't have to be perfect, and probably they will slip a little bit. But you need to have a plan. You cannot just go as you go. But probably the most important one that I have identified is empathy. And I think to me, empathy is the key of everything. I mean, you were at the different positions. I mean, when you are a project management, in my opinion, you got there because you already passed every single position that you, or the majority. Let's say if you are in a company like the one that I am, I'm supposed to have done everything that everyone that is working on a project with me is doing, right? So if you're working in different companies, maybe obviously you're dealing with people that you never really have the chance to do what they were doing. But in my particular case, that's, I deal with people that are at positions that at some point I was in 20 plus years, right? So to me, it's always that empathy of thinking, okay, well, what are you asking? Is that realistic? It's what you will have done. How would you have feel? I mean, empathy to me is extremely important because it's putting yourself on the other's position and see, is these some expectations? And this goes even beyond. I mean, positive and negative feedback. Extremely important to pass positive and negative feedback. Don't wait to pass feedback to the annual review. That's the worst thing that you can do because in a year, we don't remember anything. Give positive feedback at the moment and, give credit when it's deserved. Be also good on giving negative criticism. Most people prefer to avoid the negative criticism. Like, I'm not going to deal with that. That person can just fix his or her problem on themselves. But that's also bad, right? And you need to really learn how to pass that negative criticism, right? You have to do it in a way that is constructive, always. Not just like, do not start screaming at somebody and saying, you should have done this better, right? No, I mean, it's just saying, hey, let me see what I can do better for you. What tools do I need to give you to improve? And then trying to explain why the problem was a problem and how you think it can be fixed, right? At the end of the day, I mean, what we're doing is you end up moving into management because you have done, I mean, in our practical civil engineering environment, you end up doing, management because you have been doing what you are doing right now for a long time. And that's the reason you're on that. You have the technical knowledge and you're managing people to do it, but you can never forget that you were there. And you can just provide the tools to people so they can do their job better. And that's your job. And if they are not, identify why not and fix it, basically. And always
I
have
love
fun.
that.
I mean, the last one is always have fun. I mean, I know these are jobs and we get paid, right? I mean, obviously we need to make a living, so we're doing this and we get paid, but never forget where everything started from, right? And I think in particular in geotechnical engineering for me and civil engineering, well, it's that dream as a kid of constructing bridges and constructing things. And if that's the motivation, let's all work together towards that, right? Don't let your job to become, pushing paper and doing invoices. And I don't think any of us start this career because like, yeah, I love calling clients and telling them that they haven't paid invoices and, and controlling hours from people and say, hey, it's taking you too long to this calc, you're never going to make the budget. All that came as a result of that's where the career lead you, and obviously something that is absolutely necessary to mention too is like, obviously the money also is on those roles, right? And when you say, well, why didn't you stay on the technical side forever? Because the way the industry is structured, as you move with your technical experience into management, your salary expectations are going to increase. And that's extremely important to obviously keep in mind, right? So,
Yeah, I think you hit on some important points there too around timely feedback with that empathy, right? Like you said, we've all been there. We all grew up through the process as your manager. Timely feedback, I personally feel like it often goes over way better. Like, hey, this happened. This is how it affected us. Let's move forward for next time. But doing that with empathy, right? We're
yeah,
not yelling at somebody. We're saying like, mistakes happen. For next time, we need to do XYZ instead, and coming with that empathy with it. It's just so critical. And it's really easy when you first join like in a management role to feel like, oh, it all ends and starts with me. So I'm on the line if this doesn't work
yes,
out. And so to remember that you're building your team up to hopefully, again, like we said in the very beginning, one day they're going to be managers. So let's teach them how to give feedback with empathy and guide them.
yes, correct. And there are different styles. I mean, like what I shared today is just a style, right? It's one way. I'm not saying that is is the unique. That's what worked for me. My wife.
We don't all have to be Sebastian. We should just take
Exactly. And that's a very important point, because like my wife, her name is Ana Benavides. She works at Arcadis, and she's a principal at Arcadis. Arcadis is a very different company than American Geotechnical Environmental Services. We're about 80 people, 3 offices. I don't know how many thousand people, Arcadis has. It's a great company too. But she, obviously being a principal and being a project manager and all that, I always compare the style that she has and the style that I have. And it's absolutely different. It's very different in many senses. I mean, I think the principles, obviously the principles are similar, but the execution of those principles, it's extremely different because the tools that she has and what I have. So I always like to do the comparison in the sense that both are extremely efficient, but they don't have to be the same, right? And what we discussed today is just some tips that have worked for me. It doesn't mean that anyone has to follow them exactly. Maybe
Now
there's
try them on
some
for size.
content.
Play around with them. Maybe they need some
Exactly. Maybe
alterations to
one of
fit
the
you.
things work for you, and that's great, right?
Absolutely. I think that is always a good take-home message in all of our conversations we have here, is that you're gonna get 10 pieces of information, and if you walk away with one new thing you're trying or you're gonna implement, or try it on for size, see how it fits. Does it fit you as a leader? That's amazing.
Yeah.
You can't grab it all at once. Maybe you listen to the same thing a few times and pick up a few different things. That's what I'm always touting when we're instructing, right? I instruct a course and I'm like, oh, you know what? I remembered that this time that I didn't remember last time.
Yeah.
It's like
Correct.
that, that constant repetition is what makes us better in all these leadership aspects.
Absolutely. And it's experience, right? It's like keeping in mind that the first time that you deal with something, you may have screwed up, and that's okay. Don't make that define that experience. Just learn from that, and then the next time, I'm sure you're gonna do better. And it's understanding that all that, right? Like I also spend a lot of time explaining to people, we're all bounded to screw it up on every single job that we do, right? We start and we screw up, and adversity will always happen, but it's how you bounce back from that and how you manage the situation to rectify it and all that. That's really what defines who you are. There are people that obsess with trying to avoid that adversity, and that battle is lost. It will happen at some point. It will happen. So more relax on that and just fix it, right? And I think that's the importance of, if you expose yourself to all these different people that you hear on the podcast and different experiences, you will find your way and you will define your own style to deal with those things.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Sebastian. This has
No,
been
no,
a
it's been
lovely
fun.
conversation.
Very, yeah, it's a
I
lot of
hope to
fun.
see you back here again one day. I feel like we could go
Absolutely.
on a whole different topic.
Anytime. I'm always
Today,
willing to.
communication. Tomorrow, I don't know. We'll figure it out. But
Yes.
communication will get us there.
Yes. Absolutely. No. Awesome to hear. And obviously, anything else that I can help, always available.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Please remember, you can find the show notes for this episode at aecpmpodcast.com. There you'll find a summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during the episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all of your engineering project management endeavors.